Hey everybody, Ian Lee here. Hope y'all are doing well. So a few weeks ago I put out a video called, that contained the scales to practice for the first half of the Western Swing Standard Right or Wrong. And I had a buddy who watched it and he was telling me, man, I really loved your video, but some of the concepts are just kind of flying over my head. Some of the theory and the jargon, as it were, is just going a little too far over my head, and I'd love it if you did kind of a more of an introduction series based on some of these theoretical concepts and whatnot. So I figured that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna do some videos for a little while that I'm gonna call Jazz Violin 101. And of course, for any of you violinists, fiddle players watching this, this isn't just for jazz, this is just general music theory knowledge, and what the things that we're gonna talk about apply to can apply to all music. It doesn't have to just be one genre. Sure, different genres tend to have and resonate with different sounds. You tend to have, maybe in bluegrass, you're not going to have a major 7 chord as much, for example. Or maybe, like a dominant chord is pretty consistent across the board. Major, all these little things. So we'll get into all that in time. But I wanted to start with just the first one. I figured we could just do the major 7 chord today. The major 7 chord is typically the 1 chord of a key, or the tonic of the key. So for example, if we're in the key of C major or D major, typically you're gonna have a major 7 chord, or you can use a major 7 over C, right? So C being the 1 chord, it's the first degree of the scale. And then we're going to talk about how to build that. And let's actually think in the terms of the key of D major first. I think that'll be the best place to start, at least for the violin. Our home keys are G, D, and A. So like in the Suzuki method, when you first learn Twinkle Little Star, or if you learn Boyle Cabbage Down, you learn it in the key of A first. You don't learn it in C, because A resonates on the violin better. But we'll do D. So what is a major 7 chord, and how do we get there, and why do we call it a major 7 chord? Well, let's just break this down a little to an even smaller bite first. So when it comes to chords, I think it's pretty fair and safe to say we have essentially these kind of 2 main types. There are really 4 types of chords. You have a major, a minor, an augmented, and a diminished. But within that, really the ones that I think we hear the most, especially in modern pop music, and by pop I just mean popular in general, but you hear major and minor. A lot of the time you're hearing major and minor chords specifically. And then within a major and a minor chord, you can kind of build these extensions on top of that, making it a major 7, for example, or a minor 7, or a major 7 sharp 5. So you've still got the major chord, and you're adding the 7 or the sharp 5, or you see what I'm saying here? You're just adding these little things, but you've always got the base of the chord in and of itself working for you. So augmented and diminished chords are their own thing, not as complicated as it sounds. We'll get into that later. But you kind of have these basic major and minor chords, augmented and diminished, are triads originally. What is a triad? A 3-note chord. So for example, if I were to play D major on the violin, if I were to spell it out, it would be D, F sharp A. If there are any guitar players out there, when you play a D chord on the guitar, you are playing D, F sharp A, but you're repeating a few notes. For example, piano players would probably just grab a D with 3 fingers, right? That kind of thing. So for us violinists, we don't get to play chords all at the same time. We have to either play 2 notes, or we get to spell them out, or which is called arpeggiating. So you're spelling out the chord. It'd be like me spelling out my name versus saying it, right? So now that I've kind of talked about the basics of that, like where we have our core chords, and we're just thinking major and minor right now, and then the things we add on to them. Now we're going to talk about the major 7 chord. So how do we get to the major 7 chord? Well, we start by looking at the D major 7 scale, the major scale, or not major 7, sorry, just the D major scale in general. So let's play that and spell that out really quick. So we have open D, E, F sharp, G, A, B, C sharp. And then usually we resolve it by going to the D, the octave. Okay? So we have. I like to play a 7-note scale up and down though, instead of going to the octave. That's a Barry Harris thing, but I like it. I've adapted it. Now, so how do we get a major 7 chord? Well, what we do is we can start actually on any note of the scale, and we can skip a note, play a note, skip a note, play a note, skip a note, play a note, and that'll build the chords that naturally occur in the scale with what we have, right? So we have this group of notes, this 7 group of notes, D, E, F sharp, G, A, B, and C sharp. We have these seven notes. And we can start on any note of the scale and then play a note, skip a note, play a note, skip a note. And we do that until we have 4 notes that we've played, right? And 3 notes that we've skipped. And then we have our chord. So if we start from just the first note of the scale, D, open D there, nice. And you can do this anywhere on any instrument, right? You just have to know, little things about playing your instrument, but you can figure this out. I mean, it's all just kind of right there. And don't be afraid to like think about it and pick at it for a little while. It'll click, I promise. So we have D. The next note we have is E, but we're gonna skip that note. So now we have F sharp. Okay, great. And then the note after that is G, but we're gonna skip that. And then we have A. So far, what I've talked about already was we have D, F sharp, A. Awesome, sweet. Okay, good. Now, we're gonna skip B because that's what comes after A, and then we're gonna play C sharp. Ba-da-da-da. And that is our major 7 chord. Now again, it all kind of adds up, it's not like a fancy chord name off in the distance that you're like, ooh, major 7. It's like, why is it called that? Well, because if we look at the scale that we're playing, 1, and we put numbers to it, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There it is, there's your 7, major 7. Of course, major 7 is also referring to an interval, okay? An interval. So what that's saying is that scale degree, the C sharp, is X amount of steps away from D. Another quick way to think about it, I'm just trying to give you kind of all the perspectives so you can, latch on to whatever one feels easiest in the moment and then go from there. So we have, if we look at it like this, you can always think of the major 7, like if you want to play a major triad, whatever that is, it's G, A flat, B flat, and you want to add the major 7 to it, you can always look at the octave above. So we have D here, open D, and we have D here. Right, it sounds like somewhere over the rainbow. Anyways, and you can just go a half step below that, and there's your major 7. So you learn these little tricks about, you just kind of find, it's like mnemonic devices. You're just trying to find ways to know this. Like you want to know it in a deeper, very immediate and intimate level, but you'll get there in time as long as you kind of find different ways to grab this information. And that's what we're doing as we practice. We're just really trying to integrate this information. So it's not just muscle memory, as it were, but it's something you can latch onto very quickly. So anyways, that's a major 7 chord. Go ahead and try to find those all over the violin. There's some very specific shapes. I'll give you one little hint right now. So if we can do that on the D scale. So I'm playing open D, what we might call a high 2 as fiddle players. Open A and then a high 2. Well, you can do that same thing on the A to E string or the G and D string. Now you've got 3 major 7 chords. There's only 12 major 7 chords you can play, so you're a quarter of the way there. All right. If you guys have any questions, comments, concerns, always ask in the comment section. I'll do my best to answer them either in a following video or as a reply. I'm really happy to help out. Enjoy and have fun practicing.